Now, I want to return to something we discussed briefly last night, the procurement of US government-made Switchblade drones. Don't get me wrong, these drones are much needed, but this barely scrapes the surface when it comes to addressing the deficiencies in our Defence Force capability. There were fresh warnings this morning from two of the country's most respected military commanders that ADF personnel and key bases are vulnerable to missile attacks for at least another decade, unless the government can find more money for air defence systems. I'm pleased to say one of the men who has sounded the alarm is former Chief of Army Peter Leahy, and he joins me now. Peter, thanks for joining me. Last year's Defence Strategic Review urgently called for what it said was a layered air and missile defence capability. So why are we still seemingly on the back foot?
Well, James, I think it's the simple fact there's no money. We've seen testimony in Senate estimates just recently where defence officials said they had to reprioritise money in the budget and do this joint air battle management system in two parts. The first one is to what they've called get the brains, and then wait for the technology to catch up and get the sort of capabilities that they want. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's a bit like one of those Yes Minister shows where you have a lovely hospital with no patients. If you're going to have a full capability to protect our vulnerable north, you've got to make sure that you've got both the command and control systems, but also something to shoot. And it looks as though we're going to have to wait for a bit longer before we've got a full system that will provide the sort of protection that we need.
Obviously, you've mentioned the funding, but just talk to me about the whole procurement process when it comes to our defence forces, because that seems to be broken.
Funding is really important. Arthur Tang, Secretary of Defence, a legendary Secretary of Defence, said unless you've got a budget, you can't have a strategy. But I think there's also too many players involved in this. It's a very cumbersome system, and I had a look at it back in 2014 as part of a first principles review of defence. I thought we'd fix some of the things, but there's an absolute adverse relationship with risk. As I've said, there are too many players. People want to have a look at this. You've got to do this study. You've got to do that study. So there's no real sense of urgency. And there should be, because the DSR and the rhetoric we're hearing from our politicians and others, that this is the most dangerous strategic circumstance we've faced since before the Second World War. So I think we've got to get this thing really revved up and realise that it's getting close. We need protection, and we need it now, and these things can't be bought overnight. The sort of things, and people will see Iron Dome in Israel and Patriot missiles and so on. There just aren't enough of them now, and if we want to get in on an order system, we should be thinking about it now and doing something decisive now.
I want to ask you about the strategic situation in a moment, but there's this continual frustration, and there has been for years, with the ill-equipment of our defence forces. Is this a government issue, whether it's coalition or Labor, or is it a defence bureaucracy issue? Where's the problem here?
Oh, I think they're all culpable, James. Certainly government. They seem to want to wait and wait and wait. The bureaucracy, as I've just explained, it's risk averse. It's got process after process. But the ultimate is the National Security Committee of Cabinet. They're busy, and nearly everything that comes to defence has to go through there. So there's delays getting things put forward there. There's delays in different views through the department. And it's a really difficult period, particularly as the warning time, as we've been told, has pretty well gone away. And we're watching China and others, and these autocracies around the world. We're seeing them really test us, test the West, test NATO, testing AUKUS at the moment. So I think we just need to really get a sense of urgency about this and get stuck about doing something. But I mentioned the budget. We talked a while ago about guns and butter budgets. You need a gun budget because the threat is there, and you need a butter budget to look after the welfare of the society and the community. I think we've got that balance out of kilter at the moment. We need more money. Sadly, we need more money for guns, and we have to think about how we look after society and community.
Well, let's talk about why we need more money for guns. Historically, I guess most of us have thought, we can use our isolation to our strategic advantage, but clearly that's changed. Can you explain to viewers how the strategic landscape now necessitates a more advanced missile defence system, for example?
Well, the first point is technology has killed geography. It used to be it was 3 or 4 days to sail here or do something like that. Now missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, intermediate range missiles and so on, they can cover the territory really quickly. And if you look at some of the laydown in the maps, we can see that the DF-26, which is an intermediate range missile from China, and we see that on their parades, and it's a very sophisticated missile. It's got a range of about 4,000 kilometres. China's now on Mischief Reef. That range would get you to Broome, Darwin, Catherine, and a number of other places. So the technology has brought it closer. Also, we've got this fact that the Chinese bomber aircraft, the H-6 is one of the variations. It's got a range of 1,000 kilometres. So you put a missile on one of these things on Mischief Reef, it can fly down to just north of Java, and now a whole new range of Australian cities are in range. And we've also known for a while that American and Australian joint bases such as Pine Gap are legitimate targets for longer range missiles. So technology and geography. We're also looking at new types of attack vectors, space, and we're also looking at cyber. And we know cyber really takes care of both time, but also distance. So it's a new range of threats and we have to cope with them.
I mentioned at the start our acquisition of drones, which was announced yesterday, but it's been pointed out that killer drones have been used for many, many years now. And I mean, even the Houthi rebels have them in the Middle East. Why is Australia, a first world nation, so far behind?
It's hard to explain that one. I think, as you've explained, it's really important that we look after ourselves and the attack capabilities, but we haven't yet had the real discussion about the counter-drone capabilities. We've seen them all over the place, and we should expect that they'll be deployed against us. So we really have taken too long to get to the point, and I think we really need to recognise that this Switchblade drone, the one that we're talking about, is not a big drone. It's not a very capable drone. It's not going to change the battlefield when we introduce it. In many ways, it only weighs a bit over 3 kilos, I think, and that includes the explosive device inside it. So it's really only an anti-personnel drone, an anti-personnel weapon. So I'm not sure how it would be deployed. We really need to think now about what are the bigger ones we need, where do we get the range from them, and importantly also, how do we get the targeting information? This is going to be important for some of the longer range stuff coming to Army and to Air Force. Where do we get the targeting so we're now going to hit the target, unlike what we're seeing in Ukraine where it's scattergun all over the place. We're just starting to dabble in drones at the moment. We need a lot more work, and I think importantly, we need to be paying attention to Australian industry. I know there are some manufacturers out there who are making drones. They've tried to get them into the inventory of the ADF. They don't seem to be having much luck, as this one's coming now as a US drone. And I think we need to be careful that we nurture these types of industries and others, because I do talk to people in industry who say, listen, it's too hard, we're going offshore. It's just too difficult to get a sail into the ADF.
Yeah, so many areas of concern. Peter Leahy, thanks for your time tonight.